Shmai v'Avtalyon kiblu mehem. Just give you some historical background. Shmai and Avtalyon were the teachers of Hillel and Shammai, and they were in Babylon, and both of them were converts. But they came from, they were grandchildren of Nero, the Roman emperor. They were converts, Shmai and Avtalyon. And they were the teachers. I mentioned Hillel and Shammai, which were the greatest of the Tanakh period. And Shmai Avtalyon, Shmai Omer, Shmai says, Ehovas HaMelocha, you should love the work, Usnos Rabbonis, but you should despise Rabbonis. Literally means the rabbinate. But Rabbonis doesn't means anything which causes one a level of pressure which is all-consuming. Meaning, firstly, it doesn't say love to work. It doesn't say Eov es Melocha. It says Eov es ha-Melocha. The hay is the work. So we're talking about something very specific. A specific type of involvement, you should love that. But what comes along with it, you should despise. Now, what comes along with, what's the work? What is the endeavor? Love the endeavor. We're talking about work. We're talking about studying Torah. You should love it. Anything that a person loves. There's an expression, if there's a will, there's a way. If you want something enough, there's a moral of Prague who speaks about this, that a person yearns for something sufficiently, you could actually change nature. You could activate forces which will allow certain things to come about. Nobody loves anything more than himself. And that's the reason why people maximize on their ability, whatever that ability is. Even sometimes goes beyond their actually the limitation. Because they love themselves so much and they want to accommodate themselves to that degree, they push the envelope to the nth degree. They're always pushing the envelope. Why? Because it's me, it's I. But let's say that same expression of love, you love Torah to that degree, the Melocha. You should love it because it's the ultimate thing which is in your best interest. You will address your purpose and your value. This is your eternity. But you realize you become a great Torah sage, great Torah scholar, and you become renowned. What comes along with that? All kinds of accolades, all kinds of acknowledgements, quite a bit of ego stroking. This person says, you have the best of both worlds. I have the spiritual world, and I have all the acknowledgements of mankind. They sing my praises. It's a problem. Because the moment you value that value, that takes people down. The Ramchal writes in Path of the Just that people are great tzaddikim, the greatest, because they allow themselves and they're open to praise. Ultimately, they stop believing in their own narrative. You're this, you're that. And you get caught up and consumed by who you are rather than what you should be doing. Humility is key. To focus and not to be distracted. The moment you get caught up in your ego, I love the Rabbonis. You should love the Melocha, what's the ultimate endeavor? And the ultimate endeavor is what addresses your purpose. That's studying Torah and doing the will of God, which are the positive and negative commandments. That's the Melocha. And if anybody speak to anybody, it's work. The word Melocha means work. But it only is work if you don't appreciate its value. But if you appreciate its value, you become even more motivated. The more you're touched by it, the more motivated you become. I always tell over the story with our famous friend, a prominent friend. And he says to me, if there is a God, and God wants us to do his will, why does the tzaddik, the devoutly righteous person who adheres and conforms to all the laws of the Torah, why does God treat him on such a paltry level? Barely can make ends meet. He's denied all pleasures of life. Why doesn't God accommodate him? He's denied. So I said to this person, I want to ask you a question. You, thank God, you have a home in the city, you have a home in Westchester, you have a home in Central America, and you travel whenever you want to travel. And you even have monkeys running around your backyard. You have a menagerie. And you want to know why the tzaddik is being denied. Why is he being deprived? I said, you ever speak to the tzaddik if he feels deprived? If he feels denied? I said, why don't you have a conversation with the tzaddik? I guarantee you, when you speak to him, he'll tell you he has everything that he needs and he doesn't want more. Like they say in your language, lean and mean. He doesn't want to be distracted from the objective. You know, it's interesting. I give you a piece of rough. It was known, Mr. Glick, he belonged to the syndicate, which was De Beers. And once a month, he would have to go to England, and they would give him a closed box. The closed box was rough. And if you had, and each box cost between $18 and $25 million of this rough. And if you had a very special relation with De Beers, they knew exactly what that rough, the potential of each piece of that rough was. And because Mr. Glick was so prominent in the large gem business, and he sold the largest, best quality diamonds in the world, he was the best PR. So they would put special pieces of rough in his box. Now, Mr. Glick had the best diamond cutters working for him. Because if you don't have the best diamond, you can have the best potential to cut that piece of rough to produce a 100-carat D flawless, which is one of a color. But if the diamond cutter, actually, he could break that diamond on the wheel if he doesn't know exactly what he's doing. And he doesn't have the expertise, something that could have been endlessly more valuable, it's actually takes on less value. The soul of a Jew goes beyond anything which can be quantified. We're given tools. You know what the tools are called? The tools are called the study of Torah, that through that we become experts how exactly to cut that soul, to develop that soul, to advance it, to be worthy of a level of what? Of eternity. There's nothing compared in creation that's compared to that. But those are the tools. The tools are the intellect. Now you have a choice. What do you do with an intellect? If you understand the value of that eternity, that there's nothing more precious. Putting your eggs in any other basket, you have to be foolish. It's penny wise, pound foolish. This is not penny wise. This is infinite foolish. You're giving up infinite for what? For a moment. Avos ha-melacha. Love the melacha. Love the endeavor. Be committed to it. Be dedicated to it. Because we love what we understand is in our best interest. Sneis rabbanis. But what comes along with it is all kinds of ego stroking, acknowledgement. You don't want the acknowledgement. You should despise it. The moment you get it, try to totally deflect it. Don't let it get to you. Because if you let it get to you, you get caught up with it. And the moment you get caught up with it, your ego starts getting inflated. You become less humble. When you become less humble, I'll give you an example. A person has a sty in his eye. A person has a sty in his eye. You don't see as well. But if you have a healthy eye, you see well. So anything which causes an occlusion or your eye swells, the moment it swells, you don't see as well. The moment your ego starts swelling, you get a swollen head. Immediately, you don't have the level of clarity any longer. Your system becomes disrupted. Your sense of who you are and what you're supposed to be doing becomes impeded. It becomes minimized. Therefore, Shmaya tells you, Avos hamlocha snos rabbonis. As I told you, Hillel was the greatest student of Shmaya Neftalyo. The Gemara tells us that Hillel was so humble and so great that if the Torah wouldn't have been given through Moshe Rabbeinu, Hillel was at a level of humility the Torah could have been given through him. So why wasn't it? Because his generation wasn't worthy. Otherwise, he was worthy. And the Talmud tells a story that these two Jews, they had a wager. When Hillel the Rebbe was the prince, he was the prince of Israel living in Israel. He already had emigrated to Israel, and they had a wager, and it was a $400 wager. One says, I could get Hillel angry. And if I get him angry, you have to pay me $400. The other person says, I'm willing to wager. There's no way you can get Hillel angry under any circumstance. So they had a wager, okay? So the one who's going to actually ruffle his feathers comes to him Friday afternoon. He just came back from the bathhouse. He's preparing for Shabbos. And he calls out from down from the street to Hillel, who's on the second story. And he calls out, Hillel, Hillel. You realize Hillel's the prince of Israel. You refer to him as Hillel, Hillel. You refer to him as the grand Rabbi Hillel. No, Hillel, Hillel. Like he's a buddy. Hilly, how you doing? You know, one of those kind of things. So he's his chummy. So he calls it Hillel, Hillel. Comes to the window. He says, yes, my son. What do you want? He says, I want to know why Africans, why do they have round heads? And other people, the heads are not as oval as round as an African. Why? He says, I'll tell you the reason. The reason is because when they're born, they pull them out with certain forceps, and as a result of that, the heads are shaped round. That's what he says to this person. Okay? Person goes away. Didn't ruffle Hillel's feathers. 5 minutes later, Hillel's back doing what he's doing, preparing for Shabbos. Hillel, Hillel. Yes. Why do people who come from a certain location in Africa, why do they have like wide feet? Like webbed feet, they're wide. He says the reason is because they walk barefoot and they walk in marshes. It's like snowshoes. Their feet have to be wide, so they shouldn't sink into the mud. They should be above the mud. That's what he says to them. Okay? He leaves, comes back again. Hillel, Hillel. Why did in the Orient, why the eyes are slanted and other people's eyes are not slanted? He says, you know why? Because they have dust storms there. And if the eyes would be oval and round, the dust will go into their eyes. That because their eyes are slanted, the dust is not able to get into their eyes. Yeah, that's the reason why I have slanted eyes. Okay. And he's coming back with all these nonsensical questions one after another. And he realizes he can't get Hillel angry. So he lost the wager. All of a sudden, Hillel hears somebody pounding on his door. Like the man is berserk. He opens the door. He says, yes, my son. It's this person who's asking me all the questions. He says, Hillel, do you know what you just caused me? I just lost $400 on this wager. That I believed I could get you angry. I didn't get you angry. It cost me $400. He says, better you should lose $400 to get Hillel angry. That was Hillel's answer. That's the story cited in the Talmud. Okay? You couldn't ruffle his feathers. So therefore, but what's anger depend on? Humility. If you're truly humble, you know something, it's okay. Everything's okay. I'm willing to let it go because it doesn't make really a difference. You're ruffling my feathers, doesn't make a difference. You ask me a question, I'll answer you. I get back to my right back on track. Hillel understood what it was all about. Hillel was the greatest of the Tanaic period. He mentored the most special students. Rabbi Akiva, the greatest members of this era. But it's only he had that level of clarity because he had that level of humility. And because of that humility, therefore, he was able to merit insights and understanding of the Torah. And he understood that's where I want to be. That's my endeavor. The Gemara tells over a story that after 120 years, Hillel tells a story with Hillel. A poor man comes before the heavenly court after living so many years, and he's been judged. So Hashem says to this poor man, did you set specific times to learn? So the Gemara says, Hillel, a person after 120 years comes, and he's asked a number of questions before the heavenly tribunal. One question is asked, did you study Torah? That's the question I ask him. I gave you 90 years to live. Did you study Torah? He says, I was so impoverished. I was busy eking out a living and begging. Otherwise, I couldn't put food on my family's table. I really had no time to study. So they say to him, were you poorer than Hillel? Hillel, as a young man, lived in Babylonia. And Hillel, he was a wood chopper, woodcutter. Every day he would earn 2 pennies, and 1 penny he would give to his wife to support the family. He would cut enough wood for that. And the other penny, you had to pay an entrance fee to go into the study hall, to listen to the public lecture of Shema of Tanya. These 2 people are mentioned here. What happened? One day he was only able to earn 1 cent. So what did he do with the 1 cent? He gave it to his wife. He wasn't admitted into the Beis Medrash, into the study hall, to hear the public lecture. So what did he do? He went onto the roof, and there was a skylight. And he put his ear to the skylight, and through the skylight, he listened to the lecture of his two great mentors. What happened? He was so immersed in the shear. In Iraq, it snows. This is Babylon. It snowed to the point where there was 5 feet of snow piled on top of him. And he became unconscious. He was suffering hypothermia. The next morning, it was a sunny day, and the 2 rabbis, and it was Shabbos morning, they're giving a lecture. All of a sudden, they see, it seems to be overcast. Didn't make sense. It's a sunny day, it's overcast. They look up at the ceiling, and what do they see? They see a human form lying on the skylight. They immediately go up to the skylight. They take off the 5 feet of snow that's piled on top of him, and it's Hillel, and he's unconscious. He's suffering from hypothermia. So what do? They light a fire on Shabbos, which normally you're not permitted. But because it's a question of he was in a life-threatening situation, they violated Shabbos to save his life, and they warmed him until he came back to himself. So they say to this person, you were so poor, you couldn't afford any moments to study Torah. Were you poorer than Hillel? Hillel somehow worked it out. He found some time. You weren't. So Hillel actually is the basis for what? To find poor people to have a claim against them. Because if Hillel could do it, why couldn't you do it? So I asked the question. Hillel was the great tzaddik. Hillel was the most humble person. He was able to work it out. Nobody's telling you should be Hillel. And I always give the example. I say, I used to solicit people for learning. I said, would you like to study once a month for an hour? He says, if you would understand how busy I am, I don't have an hour a month to give you. I said, what about a half an hour? He says, Rabbi, if you would understand how busy I am, I don't have half an hour. I said, what about 5 minutes? He says, Rabbi, I told you, I don't have 5 minutes. So I said to the person, if you don't have 5 minutes, you don't value it to any degree. That means because if you value it even to the smallest degree, 5 minutes you have. And if you can't give it 5 minutes, that means it has no value to you. And that's the same thing. Nobody expects you to be Hillel. Hillel is the great Torah giant, the great spiritual luminary. But on your level, to the degree that minimally you should have valued it, you had no time to study. You know what the answer is? If you would have been interested, you would have found time. Even a minimum amount of time. That you have no time, that means it has no value in your life. It has no place in your life. Therefore, there's a claim against you. And that's where it begins, that's where it ends. If you have any Avos HaMelocha, if you have any positive feeling towards Torah, where it doesn't relate to your ego, you find time. God forbid, I don't care how busy a person is, if a person's wife, God forbid, comes down with cancer and she has to go to chemo, she needs somebody to accompany her. The husband, as busy as he's going to find time for his wife. Why? Because your wife's life is important to you. And her feelings are important to you. That overrides the business. Somehow you find time. A friend comes from out of town. You haven't seen him in 20 years, a good friend. You find time to go out to dinner. Why do you find time? Because you value that relationship. Anything you value, you give it some time. If you give it no time, that means you don't value it whatsoever. And that's the reality. That's the litmus test. What is life? Life is time. Life has great value. So he said something interesting. A person comes in and his plane comes in half an hour early. So he calls up a friend, says, I have a half an hour to kill. You got it? I have a half an hour to kill. So he said, it's interesting. What's life? Life is time. So when you waste a half an hour, what are you doing? I have a half an hour to kill. The term kill, okay? Then he said something interesting. Mark Spitz, he won the gold medal in swing for the United States in the Olympics. After he won that gold medal, Mark Spitz was hired by Procter Gamble, by all these companies for advertisements. How much did he come in earlier than the person who competed with him, or those? 1/100th of a second earlier. So what is 100th of a second worth? $500,000 contract for Colgate. Got it? A 100th of a second or a minute, whatever it was. What is the value of time? Could be $500,000. Do you know what the value of time is? That's the point he wanted to make. You kill time, you value time, you can even put it into cash dollars, what time is. Avos hamalocha. Love the work. Love the endeavor. Because if you want to maximize on return, that's what you do. Because there's nothing more valuable than that. But don't, a person gets packaging. Years ago, they used to sell things on Fifth Avenue. The person would approach, he says, you want to buy a recorder for $5, for $3? See, either it was one or two things. Either it was stolen goods or something which you used it once and after it didn't work any longer. And the packaging was so attractive that he felt if it's packaged that way, it must be something. So the only way it could be stolen, so the person bought it. He opens it up. It doesn't even have a place to put a battery in. It's a battery-operated thing. So why was he fooled? He was fooled by the packaging. The fact she was so ornate, so attractive, it caught his eye. Elvis Amloch's Nes Rabbonis. Don't let the pomp and all the ego stroking, don't let that distract you. Because that's not what it's about. You get caught up with the packaging and with the glitz and the glamour, you miss the boat. You don't appreciate what you should appreciate. Because everything in life is focus. And the moment your ego gets involved, you get night blindness. You're getting scurvy, even though you're not lacking in vitamin C, Larry. Scurvy. Like your father used to call it scurvy, right? Okay. Bob, what do you say that?